Data movement planning is what we're going to discuss in this video, and it's going to be short, but just make sure that you understand the concept that's being conveyed here, because you will be asked this in a number of different forms on the exam. So first of all, what is data movement? Well, this is pretty straightforward, right? It's the process of obtaining the desired data from the source and moving it, or what we might be called pumping it or loading it into the data warehouse. You hear a lot of different terms there. You'll also hear this whole process referred to as ETL, extraction, transformation, and loading. But it's just the process of moving the data from where we want it into the data warehouse where we want it there. Now, there are two types of data movement. I've already mentioned these in the course, and I'm going to say them one more time here. Make sure that you watch for this on the exam. There's simple data movement, and this is where we don't have to change the data. We just grab it from somewhere, drop it into a location in our data warehouse. And a simple data movement requires no data modifications, and we can use the SQL Server import export wizard for these. And so watch for that little stipulation on the exam. Complex data movement is when we do need to transform the data during the move, and as a result, that means we have to use SQL Server integration services, and the way we do that here is by using SQL data tools. The bottom line is, if it's complex, it means it has to be transformed. That means we have to use SQL data tools and integration services to make that happen. Now, let me show you a couple of scenarios. There are as many different ways to do data warehousing as there are data warehouses. And it's always fascinating to look at how someone has built theirs and how it's running, because you always get ideas and you're standing there thinking, wow, man, I should have done that. I think I'll do that. Then there's also other things that you're looking at thinking, I wouldn't have done it that way. There's, that's going to be a problem down the road. So anyway, notice that data movement requires considerable planning out there in the real world. This is not a quick 15-minute meeting. Data movement is, first of all, we've got to make sure we're getting the right data. Moving it can get complex. We have to do lookups to make sure we have the right data, on and on and on. There's lots of things to consider here. And so let me give you a couple of examples. You may have data out there in multiple data sources. These could be SQL Server. They could be all kinds of other sources. And you want to get them into a staging table. And it's somewhat complex. And so first thing we're going to do is just grab all of our data, bring it into our staging table, and then from there, once we've got it manipulated, we'll move it into our data warehouse. And there could be 2 or 3 steps of staging tables, depending on where you're getting your data from, what kind of modifications are necessary, and so forth. And notice you can do transformations on each one of these loads into the staging table, and then do more translations and conversions going into the data warehouse. So as you can see, this could get pretty involved. And then there's the situation where you have your data out there in sources. You just bring them into the data warehouse, and you can take care of all your transformations as the data is loaded into the data warehouse. So in the real world and on the exam, you may see these scenarios. Just understand we're talking about, obviously here, complex data imports or complex data movement. Notice right up here, one of these could be a simple, where we're just using the import export wizard to grab this data, drop it into our staging table. That's not unusual at all. But a lot goes into data movement planning, but just make sure you understand the difference between simple and complex, and just this whole kind of genre, this whole big world universe of data movement, and what all can be involved here. And you should be able to pick your way through the questions on the exam just fine.